All right. Hello, everybody. We're back again. We're going to try to finish up the video that Sam did, the first video on Bart Ehrman, where he blew so many things, and we just started going through it because of what a catastrophe it was. And of course, he attacks us, insults our mothers, and defames God. But it's just been a gold mine, right? Of all kinds of stuff, not just like blunders, really bad errors, misconnections, inventions of connections that aren't connected, and then just really bad, dumb stuff, like we saw last night and in part one, where he doesn't even understand what it means when what Bart Ehrman means when he says as early as the 40s, right? This is the person that all these people are relying on to interpret the Bible for them. So, we know that a lot of people are gone, right? No one more so than Sam. Doesn't mean he's not experienced, he is, right? Just like the devils, right? And you would have a very hard time beating him in a lie contest, I guarantee it. So it's not about that. It's just a question of whether or not you have the truth and can use it effectively to expose, right? Expose the lie. And that's really easy to do with Sam. You just compare what he actually says and the connections he tries to make, and you can see if they're there or not, and they're almost never there, right? The most famous example recently being his invention of an identity between the rock of 1 Corinthians 10:4 and the rock that is Yahweh in Deuteronomy 32 and elsewhere. But that's not what is being talked about there, because it's a different rock in Deuteronomy 32 that actually relates to the very rock in 1 Corinthians 10 that's spiritualized by Paul and applied to you-know-who, Jesus Christ. So, and it's an original actual rock in the account that it's applied from. So he does these kinds of weird things, right? We also saw yesterday how I summarized the other episodes yesterday, so I'll just kind of do a real brief rundown of a couple points. We got some really good stuff tonight. I'm going to bring online some works from Philo. We're going to look at for Genesis 18 because Sam talks about that. And I think you'll see it's interesting how they, well, I'll read it and we'll talk about it, okay? But you definitely want to see this. I've done a lot of work with Philo, as you know. I have a book coming out. It's taken a long while as I spend a lot of time with, especially with Philo or with biblical text or textual material, where translation issues are involved, right? The historicity of the text is one thing, and then the meaning of the text, the best available text, most likely text, is another. So, you have New Testament textual criticism, which relates, of course, to Bart Ehrman's specialty, and it comes up a lot with us. And I've done a lot of work there. I've also gone to manuscript centers, the Ancient Biblical Manuscript Center in Claremont, California. I've been there many times. Used to go there a lot more. I've pulled microfilm of all kinds of texts. I have text myself. So, I'm capable. I also look at papyri, non-biblical and biblical, all the time. And I study ancient Greek poetry almost every day. Homeric poems, epic poems, and other texts. We'll be talking about how those influence people like Philo tonight, and also other documents like Sirach, right? The whole misuse by that document by people like Sam, who try to claim that the writer is speaking to the dead like he does, which is not what's happening. And if Sam and other people like him weren't so stupid when it comes to Homeric or epic poetry, he would understand the correspondence between Sirach and numerous examples that I'll be providing very soon. I'm just trying to figure out if I should do a paper or a blog on it. I got an Ignatius blog coming soon. Basically, a written form of what I prepared and presented when I was live with Jake. That's the paper I mentioned when I was with him for Ignatius. So it'll be better. It'll be a structured presentation of the material I provided and we reviewed that day. That should be out within a month. And then after that, I have a narrative article on the same blog, Watching the Ministry, that I did for the narrative style speakers in Isaiah. And then the Elihu Online papers and the rest of the media are also coming. Just been busy, of course, and we're dealing with Sam. And we're going to try to hammer him every day. And where we don't do a live every day, we'll do things like I'll either upload a video or, maybe we'll skip a day. But there's no reason to really take off time anymore until order has been restored or he's been so exposed that it's a joke. It already is, but not enough people know it, right? I mean, we know it. A lot of his horde knows. I mean, he's fractured all over the place. It still takes them a while, though. And a lot of them still have beliefs in place and things where even if they fracture from Sam, it's not so evident to us in ways like they keep to themselves, kind of, or the belief-wise, it won't really matter, ultimately. So, nevertheless, as long as you and I can see what we're talking about and confidently rely on it when we're talking to other people about it, that's what we're here for, right? You want to know. You want to know what's the best information that you can use to reinforce your own beliefs and help other people. Now, we use Sam and his failure to deal with Bart Ehrman because Sam is popular. He attacks us all the time. He's looked to as their number one guy, right? And as we've said, he, in terms of argumentation, his experience, history, and ability to just keep not agreeing with you, right? No matter how convincing or what evidence you provide, it's just, he's very good at ignoring it and changing subjects. So tactically, on the fly, Sam is probably their best, proponent. He's not their most technically sound person by a long shot, right? Couple miles. And he does have a decent knowledge of church history. He's not incompetent there. He's not like a skilled church historian. And again, with Sam, he doesn't really know how to appreciate people. So he'll misclassify other people, especially people like me, that even though he admires and learned almost most of what he knows from or related to, right? He'll still denigrate me or even other people like real notable scholars, Dan Wallace and others, because he's not a good person like we've been talking about. Bart Ehrman, right? Anyone Sam disagrees with, it doesn't really matter who or what you are. He's going to speak of you in ways that are despicable and befitting a dastardly fellow, a dastardly person. So we try to have a little fun with Sam because I've known him a long time, like late 80s type of long time, and people I've known have known Sam, and he's been around a while. I've known a lot of people that he knows as well. This is not new. It's taken us a long time to deal with this fruitcake, okay? He's a crazy person. But he's been empowered by other people who, though many have admitted their mistakes, and ultimately everybody realizes their mistake. Fact is, people keep making mistakes with Sam. And he has a skill there too. Yeah, he's very good, actually. I'll put my shirt a little bit better. He's very good, actually, at getting you to change your disposition, okay? Even if you really had it out with him or he's been able to insult you and demean you, part of what makes Sam Sam is he likes to be able to show you are so pathetic. He can do that and you won't care, okay? It's just kind of a way for Sam to gauge, and he's gotten away with it so long. He's not really used to what he's dealing with right now. He is and he isn't, right? He's always had conflict, and he's always been a kook, right? But now he's getting it, he's getting intellectually just pounded into the ground, right? Like he always has, but right now we're really pouring it on. We've done it before. We tried to work with Sam before. Doesn't it won't work, right? We did try. I think Christians should try. Sam does not try. He sets you up, right? So he'll get you to back off and then he'll attack you again. Now you've got to get remotivated. See, he's prepared for that. That's what he wants. Most people kind of, when like you like squash the beef like they always talk about, which never holds. But most normal people want it to hold, right? When you squash the beef with someone, like you get over a dispute that's pretty heavy and significant, usually a normal person wants that to continue, right? Not Sam. Okay. So this is a little tricky, right? So Sam has many, many problems where it concerns his, of course, theology, his antics, his behavior, his pretty much everything. I could go on. I have, right? So, but we're going to deal with his arguments tonight on Bart Ehrman, and he starts out with Genesis 18, which is where we left off yesterday, at the end of yesterday's show. We're going to be talking a lot about angels. We'll get into Philo as well. Philo is a Jew who was active during the time of much of the New Testament, lived through 250 CE. So, but he's not the same type of Jew that Paul is. Not based on the writings, okay, and their teachings explicitly. So, however, that doesn't mean that someone like Paul wasn't familiar with similar writers, like Homer even. Homer was a very well-known writer and part of the education of Greek, almost probably anywhere it was taught or learned, whether Jew or non-Jew area, because that's just the most popular writings, and or some of them that were used for those purposes, and ways to teach poetry and speaking and storytelling and grammar, right? So those were well known. Now, Paul never mentions Homer, but, you know, he does talk about different writers that are non-Christian and poets, but almost for sure he knew of Homer, of course. But he doesn't come right out and quote him and rely on him like Philo does. I'm not saying in the quote tonight that he gives, he's necessarily he is using him to support what he says about the angels in Genesis 18, but it's kind of just an associated support to what he's saying. And also the poet Homer says this, you'll see. So he kind of develops this whole idea of what is going on in Genesis 18 with the three men there. And so since Sam talks about that tonight with Bart Ehrman, this is going to be relevant because the Trinitarians and others, everybody, you know, a lot of what they're using to understand the metaphysics of God, especially the orthos, the orthopagans, the Greek Orthodox, any Orthodox person who embraces the powers and energies, which is pretty much all of them, that I think, right? I don't know if there's a dispute necessarily among certain groups on those, but I'm familiar with people like Palamas, right? I have his triads here, and Maximus the Confessor, and others who are in the Greek orthopagan lineage, right? All the way down to the Cappadocians, right? And of course, they love Athanasius, they love Constantine. But then you have the whole split between Rome and Byzantium, but it's still the same dragon. And either way, they're in schism and they don't have the same views. They have a different view, that is the Catholics and the orthopagans and Protestants, but the Protestants are kind of a, well, we'll just say, so the Catholics and orthopagans have a different view of the Trinity in this way. And it is fundamentally different, but ultimately, as I've said before, there are some overarching similarities, like one God, that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit share in the nature of the one God, and that they're persons. But the ortho-pagans adopt a lot of their theology from what we call Middle Platonists. Middle Platonists are people who start to use the writings of Plato, who didn't really fully define his view of the forms and ideas in the mind of God, that he viewed as eternal and as the cause of everything that you see that is visible, that it has a corresponding eternal form. Now, there are different people like Philo who start to use Plato in these ways and apply what he says to God, like the God of the Bible, right? So Philo's a Jew and he believes the God of the Bible, but he's also very much a believer in Plato. So he doesn't see either one of those as they're both for him true. And so this is where they get their whole monarchia, even that word, monarchia. I don't know that it necessarily comes up tonight, but certainly I have a whole section on that in my pending book on Philo, and that's where it comes from. And the ortho-pagans and others, they try to make this distinction and a big deal out of it, which is, you'll see tonight, it is described in one way. I don't know if that word's used, though, but it's what they mean. That basically the Father's like the fountainhead from which everything else flows. So it's still all part of the same nature, but the Father is the source of all these eternal powers and energies, these forms, right? But for Jews like Philo, he's not, even though he says stuff like that give this kind of similarity or connection that's similar, that Trinitarians in later centuries, from the first century forward, Justin Martyr, Origen, Clement of Alexandria, and all the way in through the whole ortho-pagan tradition, right? They get to Origen and then he becomes their big guy. But, and then Athanasius and stuff, but Origen's a big figure for them, but he gets a lot from, again, Philo. So you have this sort of lineage of Middle Platonism, okay, with key figures, at least from Philo to Origen and then to Athanasius and then further. But they develop it in different ways at different times, so it doesn't remain static. It changes and develops with the understanding that comes from the New Testament and in successive centuries through to the Council of Nicaea. So what you're going to read tonight as we get into this, we're going to play Sam in a minute, and he's going to bring in Genesis 18. It's going to trigger all this. But I'm giving you kind of a preface to Philo and what we're going to be reading from him about Genesis 18. Okay, so when I read it, I'm just going to keep reading, maybe break a little. You'll understand what I'm telling you now. As we read it, he talks about the powers. I'm also going to be showing you a part where he talks about Isaiah 6. I mentioned it before in another video related to Isaiah 6 recently, but I'm going to share with you a view. He gives both of Isaiah 6 and of God and Lord as the cherubim, separate from the God who's beyond all, which you'll see is nameless. Again, Middle Platonism, like with Philo, it's a lot different than what you read in the Bible, okay? You're going to see this very clearly. But this whole energies and powers. So the ortho-pagans believe in this very much so, and it stems from, again, figures like Philo, who use Plato and see these eternal forms in the mind of God that in people like Philo and later writers, Christians and Jews, are personalized into these powers that are the means by which God effects things in the created world, so that he's never in direct contact with it himself. Never. You're never, ever encountering the real God, like the Father, ever in Philo. You're going to see that really clear tonight, and I've shown it before, right? No, you're always engaging his powers, okay? You're always only engaging his powers, and even those may not be real engagements, but rather engagements put in your mind as if they're really happening so that you can have the experience. Kind of like the Isaiah 6 thing, if that's how you see it. Anyway, so I'm giving you a little preface here. I'm not going to get into it too much more because it gets kind of heavy, and Philo's going to explain more. But he's contemporary with people like John and others. He uses words like logos a lot because that's a popular Greek concept in many schools. And so, but John doesn't really use it like Philo. He doesn't even use terms to describe it like Philo, like theos, divine, right? He uses theos or monogenes theos. He doesn't use theos for the logos, like the divine word. That's more Philo. And especially if you're saying he was influenced by him, John, I don't think so. I don't really see that at all. The Greek translator, the word logos, that's not, it's a pretty common term, especially in this context where we are dealing with cosmic beings in ways where, whether it's in a non-biblical writer, Greek writer, or someone like Philo or John, that's not a big deal, just the word, right? There has to be conceptually the same idea with the word used for us to say, okay, yeah, they're basically the same, So I don't see that in Philo and John. I do not see them. John, I'm not saying he's not aware of him. And I think Philo's even part of a deputation that's mentioned in the book of Acts. So again, they're just not, they don't talk the same. Philo, what he says about the powers and energies, even he, I believe, sees them outside of the physical creation. Remember, I have a whole video on time, and I have a whole video on Philo and time and the Logos, where I show what he's talking about in terms of the physical universe and system of timekeeping that we read also about in Genesis. Outside of that, though, not only does the Bible show that there's time, just kept in a different way or the same way, but in a way we can't fully relate to, but that they do, and that is explicitly stated. They have days, yom. They meet at specific times and not at other times. Angels are created in the Bible, and powers are created, all of them. So God is the only power in the Bible that's eternal. The Bible doesn't present God as a being that has eternal forms that he uses as these powers when he affects those things into the physical world, whether it's creation, whether it's royal, kingly lordship, punishment actions or justice actions, mercy, right, grace. All of these are powers or energies of God in Middle Platonic and ortho-pagan views that are basically eternal because they're outside of the physical system of time. So that's why they keep saying, well, it's outside of time. That's just the physical time in the Bible. The Bible presents time in the non-physical realm as well, where, as I've said and as I've shown, it's just not time kept by the same system of measurement that we're in as inhabitants of this planet, right? So, but they have other things that happen that mark their days and times when they meet or when things occur and or are done in heaven. Periods of time in heaven, the Bible describes, a whole video about it. So again, we don't need to guess or adopt Platonism in order to figure out time. We know what it is. The Bible says it's in heaven and on earth. Even in Proverbs 8, wisdom describes periods of time where it is before Yahweh. So, but even in Philo, though, Philo speaks about, as I've shown, and have much more to show. Oh, I haven't really shown hardly anything, just a few things, because it gets pretty deep, and I want to wait till I get my book out before I get too involved in it, or I'll never get it out, right? I've shown a few things, though. Even for Philo and Middle Platonists like him, like Justin Martyr, Christian Middle Platonist that I believe is similar in ways where, and I would even argue up through to Origen, you have something similar, like even in Clement of Alexandria, referring to Jesus as created before he became a man, and Origen too. But you get into issues with his text and people affecting him, and he does get into the whole eternal generation ways, where that's also a Greek philosophical idea that does not necessarily mean eternal the way they mean it. And the way Origen means it is also not the way Trinitarians mean it, which is why he's a heretic today. But again, that's not what the Bible's talking about either. It's all part of Middle Platonism, that even for people like Philo, okay? So for Philo, you have these eternal, you have the mind of God with all these eternal forms or ideas that then become the basis for this the same thing in the physical world. So everything you see in the physical world has an eternal form in the whole Platonic, Middle Platonic model of thought. But in Middle Platonism, you have, for Philo, this whole biblical model of God involved with the eternal forms and ideas. That what happens is, for Philo at least, God has an idea, which then becomes the archetype or plan. I talk about this in my Philo and Creation Logos video. You're going to see it again tonight in another section. So even there, you have this kind of sequential pattern in Philo, where it's not based on the physical elements of time. It's just based on the mind of God and when he decides to effect something outside of the eternal forms. So he comes up with an archetype from one of the eternal forms that is then used as the basis for what he wants to do. And the archetype in this case would be the logos. So that's why, it can get a little heavy. But just remember, this is not what the Bible teaches. Right? So you don't really have to remember it unless you want to talk to Trinitarians or others who, especially orthopagans who think a lot like this. And they start to cite figures like Philo and others after him and say, well, see, Trinity and powers, energies, right? It's what we're talking about. That's why, right? So the orthopagans see God the Father as the monarch, right? The fountainhead, the main figure from which all these other eternal forms come, and when they are used to effect what he wants in outside of a realm of ideas, that's what he uses. He uses these eternal forms, these ideas that are in his mind. It gets a little heavy, like I said, but even there, like I said, he comes up with an archetype and the plan, which then is the basis for what he does. But that aside, I already talked about it. So orthopagans see, that's why when they talk about Jesus as the wisdom of God, right, they see him as this energy, right, this power, this eternal abstraction, but that's real and personal and shares in the nature of God, because it's part of the mind of God. It's one of his attributes, okay? They see that as a real thing, not as just like what we know it to be and what it is, especially in the Bible, right? It's an attribute. It's something that's not really there. Wisdom, even for you as a person or me, we don't have something that is wisdom. Like there's something you can point to or identify, or if you dig down deep enough into Sam's brain, you'll find like a toothpick of wisdom, No. Wisdom is just something we make up as a way of attribute a quality to someone based on their actions. It's the same with love, right? Love is not a real thing. That's why when they try to compare John 1:1, Theos en ho logos, with 1 John 4:8, God is love. The word was a God or God is love. Even though those are two totally different nouns, right? Love, agape, is an abstract noun. It's not an actual thing, a count noun that's pluralized like God is, right? John 10, gods, real beings. No, love, you don't say loves. Do you say loves? Like there's multiple loves? No, we never talk like that. Why? It's not a real thing. It's an abstraction. Love, what does the Bible define love as in 1 Corinthians? It defines it as a series of things people do that show they have the quality of love, right? If we looked at that text, and maybe we will, but you all know what I'm talking about, right? Love is patient. Love is kind. Love doesn't look out for its own interests, but that of the other person. These are all actions, right? If you're patient, what are you doing? You're waiting. You're calm. You're not rushed. If you're kind, what are you? You're nice to people, right? You're pleasant to be around. If you look out for another person's interest, not your own, you're acting, right? That's how love is literally defined in the Bible. God is he embodies those things. He's not an actual thing called love that really exists beyond an attribute we give to people who have the qualities shown or defined in the Bible. That's why orthopagans hate definitions and stuff, right? They like to come up with their own ideas, right? Come up with their own beliefs about these abstractions and just forget about how the Bible actually defines them literally in terms of love, and then based on the actual texts that describe things like wisdom, what that is, right? It's not an actual thing. It's an attribute that you either have or don't have based on what people see or you do, right? And it's attributed to you based rightly or wrongly. So they make all these false comparisons and it gets all weird. Why? Because in John 1:1c, when they say the word was God, they see that as an eternal abstraction, the divine nature, right? That's never how the Bible uses the word God, as this personless, eternal abstraction. No, it's always just a divine being, either God the Father, his own eternal divine being, spirit, or another spirit who's born from him who's also divine like him. That's it. There is no other sense, unless, metaphorically or applied to a human. I'm talking about like in the spiritual sense, So there's no use of God in the Bible anywhere where it clearly refers to a divine person without its own individual nature. That never happens. They're just assuming that's the case in John 1:1c and ignoring the fact that that's not what it's doing. So they lie and they say, well, because theos is in front of the verb, it's a predicate nominative, it's just emphasizing the nature of the divine being. Yeah, theos is a divine being, but because he put it before the verb and it's a nominative and it's a copular verb, just the quality. Forget the whole divine being part, okay, Greg? Yeah. Oh, you want when the God he's with, that isn't a predicate nominative preceding the verb? Same thing, right? Same thing, Greg. Just it's divine nature. Although they're right, it would have to be a little different. It would have to be actually the person and the nature, because it's not attributing, like in John 1:1c, the predicate to the subject, right? It's just saying he's with the God, right? Ton theon. So there is no attribution of a predicate nominative to a person like the Father, which they lie about and say is the case there. No, it's an actual definite noun with the article. Hello. Hello, right? So stupid. So the word is with that God. There is no other way to understand or translate it. There's only ways to lie about it. Like the God just means he's with a person of the God, which is the Trinity they're assuming, right? No, he's with the God. The God in Genesis 1:1, it just said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with the God. I wonder who that could be, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? So stupid. Job 38 teaches explicitly, all the sons of God, angels of God, were there with God in the beginning, where he created all these things that were created in the beginning. So there's nothing anyone would have been confused about, people. Theos as a predicate nominative before the verb, describing logos, does not make it qualitative only and no longer a noun, i.e. an instance of that nature or thing, a God, right? God or a God, it's one of the two. And it just said he's with you-know-who, God. So he has to be a God. There's no other way around it. And I don't care if you want to say, if you want, Yeah, fronting the verb, as I've shown in my writings and proven with dissertations, and it's very common knowledge in both New Testament and all kinds of Greek, fronting the verb is very common for just emphasizing the term you want to stand out. It's a way of emphasizing, that's all. It has nothing to do with dividing the term up into qualities and instantiation, right? It's so stupid. And then again, he's with the God. So it's game over. There's nothing really ever to do to have to deal with Trinitarians. They've been defeated the whole time, right? Without the dragon church and all the persecution and lies. Dragon's fallen, right? They've been in schism. They've had massive defeats, had massive purgings. So they've fallen. They're still here, though, a lot of influence, but definitely weak. I mean, they've got Sam. He's good. Look at how they are now. Think how bad they were before. Look what Constantine did. That whole 4th century was insane. They were back and forth, nonstop wars, constant wars, just dominating everybody in Jesus' name like a dragon dressed as a lamb. Are you kidding me? Anyway, believe what you want, but John 1:1's like the easiest text in the Bible, and they can't figure it out. And then you get people like Philo who even uses terms like deuteros theos, similar to Justin Martyr's heteros theos, which basically for William and others would have to be the exact same because they believe they are saying the same thing, only Jew and Christian. So it gets really weird because they don't understand what's happening here. They don't really understand the whole Platonism, Middle Platonism of Philo and others, or Justin Martyr and many others. So, especially people like Sam, we're going to get to it right now, they're gone, okay? Sam does everything I just said. Even he could listen to it 100 times and he won't understand it. I bet you, though, what I just said about the energies and powers probably is going to, he's been trying to figure it out. He's just gone. I tried to help make it clear there, Sam. You should have also seen my energies and powers video by now. So I know you know about the text in Paul where he says, yeah, all the angels, all the powers, they're all created. Any other creation. So that means all of those are creations. No other way to look at that. And we already know that from other texts as well, especially the angels. So it's game over, pal. All the powers, all the energies. There is no real energies in the Bible the way you orthopagans talk about it. Now for Philo, that's really powers. He uses powers more than energies. But the orthopagans like to use energeia from the New Testament and claim that that's what it's teaching, their powers doctrine, energies doctrine, which would be the equivalent of Philo's powers doctrine, basically. But the New Testament doesn't teach either one in those ways, like these powers plural or energies plural, or how they see them as this sort of eternal forms or ideas in the mind of God a la Plato, but with the biblical God and all these figures and people, angels. No, none of that's taught in the Bible. And all energies, there is no energies taught in the Bible like that. All the powers in the plural are there, and they're created. Angels are created. They're all created. There is no such thing as an uncreated energy or uncreated angel, I'm sorry. There's no such thing as an uncreated power except for God, who is called the power. But then there are the powers that are created and also subjected to Jesus, along with the angels, right? For the orthopagans, these are all powers, basically. The angels, Jesus, right? Even God and Lord, those two terms. This is what I was mentioning in part 1 about how Sam didn't contextualize Bart Ehrman's references to Jesus as not equal to Yahweh, but equal to God. For Philo, God and Lord are two powers. You're going to see that in just a moment. They're the two chief powers. They're not God. One's called God, but you'll see. That's how it is, though. The other one is the Ha'on, the being, like from Genesis 3:14. But even Philo says that's not a name because he's nameless, because they don't use a name because they're Middle Platonists. And that's what happened to God's name, everybody. They even got rid of it from Origen, who used it throughout the hexapla, Old Testament versions, Hebrew and Greek. So he even said the most accurate have them. Well, where are they? Exactly, pagans. Okay, so this is going to be good stuff for you. You really, if you want to understand this whole energies, powers, monarchia. Again, remember, when they say you don't believe in the monarchy, oh, you don't understand the monarchia, that term, monarchia, you can look it up, do a search. I already have it all marked out. I know exactly how many words used. It's just not going to be used, I think, in what we're reading tonight. But the way the Father is described in what we read tonight basically is what they mean by monarchia. You can look, monarchia and Philo, it'll come right up, because he's the one who gives them that term that they start using to try to explain these other references that put the Father above everybody else, but that they just basically mean that he's the fountainhead from which they all flow eternally, and so they're all sharing the divine nature as persons or powers, regardless of any kind of subordinated, like you're going to see tonight, right? Calls his two chief powers his ministering powers. Like, so for orthopagans, this is all no problem within their understanding of God based on Middle Platonism, Plato, which isn't biblical. It's all non-biblical. I just explained inside a few texts that directly contradict what they believe about angels and powers. God's names all throughout the Bible, they have no concept. They literally believe in the Septuagint as the divine replacement of the Hebrew Bible, and they don't use a form of the Septuagint that has the divine name, even though Origen says the best copies have it. So they're gone on all levels, okay? They're gone on the powers, they're gone on the angels, they're gone on the chief powers, they're gone on God, gone on Lord, gone on the divine name. And then they go way gone on the Trinity, even beyond Philo, even beyond all these people, Justin Martyr, right? So everyone who's kind of like this from Philo forward into the Christian Middle Platonist era, it just keeps getting worse, right? And it eventually reaches a point where they don't even have the Bible anymore at the time of Athanasius, not conveniently. He didn't have it, not originally. Or the writers he was even quoting, like Origen. And so it was a catastrophe. And then they got rid of Origen stuff. They brought in all these other texts, these Caesarean texts and other texts that it's a whole, we're going to get into it more, but I don't want to get too far off. So Sam's gone on all levels. None of this is capable of his abilities, right? It's all beyond Sam. Everything I just said to you about the energies, powers, Philo, and all that stuff, that is more than I guarantee you can show me. Anyone else online right now has explained to you in the same amount of time by referencing the same people in the relevant ways. And if you think so, show me. I don't think so. I'll do a separate clip of it, but we got more to talk about. This is all very important, though, especially if you understand these subjects and know how to talk to these people, okay? Really, though, the shortcut before we get started, just remember the orthopagans believe these powers, these energies, and the angels basically are not created. The angels part gets a little complicated for them, but they basically don't believe they're created. They can't. Where would they be created, right? They don't believe time exists in the realm of the ideas, even though there is time and there is sequence, there are activities, there is creation even in terms of something happening that didn't happen before, but it's just described and charted differently, you could say. Either way, best way to deal with them is just to show the powers are created and that there is no teaching of energies plural in the Bible. It's powers, just like in Philo, contemporary with the Bible. And in the Bible, they're clearly created. And in Philo, they're even created because God has to have an archetype first that he uses to affect what happens. They'll say that, well, they're the eternal forms. Well, okay, so then in that sense, they're only eternal in the sense in which they see them as these abstractions in the mind of God a la Plato. That's not the Bible, okay? So you don't need to argue with them if they want to claim that these eternal abstractions or powers or energies of God are eternal. You can just show the Bible teaches they're not, and they're not real attributes of God, okay? In the Bible, wisdom, word, these are just names. Literally, word is a name. And wisdom is given to the same person who gives the name word. And he's clearly a real person. So these aren't eternal abstractions. They're names and titles, descriptions given to real beings. The Bible does not present the kinds of energies, powers of God that the orthopagans teach and believe these angels and Jesus as the word are. Okay, you're going to see that real clearly. Look at the way Philo talks about it. We're going to get to it right now. Betsy, dissertational, czar. Randy Kalakalar, Kyle, nice. Glad you enjoyed the 1914 video. Yes, I hate to do that, Kyle. As you know, I'm like the main defender of Jehovah's Witnesses, and I believe, still, but not of the Watchtower, because just like with Christians of old and Christians of today, they're not following the way, and they call themselves the truth, and they're not that either. So we have to stop following people, no matter how convenient it may be, who are lying to us. Okay, that's not what we should be doing. It's not always easy, but we still shouldn't be doing it, right? So it's unfortunate we have to deal with it at all. We don't have more people or groups who are just willing to help people facilitate genuine love, fellowship, and truth, but they see it as a means of gain, like Sam and others. They just want your money. They want to not work, and they want to lie about people and God because they're little men, right? Sam is the ultimate little man, as we know. NZ Brandon, good to see you. Bankhead, on fire as usual. Okay, I apologize if I missed you all. Let's get to Sam. Unfortunately, we do have to do it. He's done things again. Sam is doing things again, as we all know. Yes. Yes, he has done things. Okay, where's that link for Sam? Yes, right here. Come, Sam. Come. Come. Come and stop your confessions. Your perverted confessions, Sam. Stop that right now. Bad. Shame on you, Sam. We know what you do. Sam, you can pretend all you want. So we know Sam is crazy and he's gone insane. So we have plenty of material, though. If you heard him today, it was a catastrophe, and I could only handle so much. So I just let him do his thing, and we have so much already. It's a joke. Like I said, he's not really to be taken seriously beyond these kinds of videos and stuff. He's chickened out on everything meaningful. I've destroyed him in so many meaningful ways. And he's not a good person. He's someone that should be destroyed in these ways, like Jude and others say. Those words are used in the Bible, New Testament. We don't necessarily want to see Sam destroyed. We want him to stop lying about the Bible, okay? And stop defaming God and attacking us and our mothers and defaming our mothers when you're a little pig bitch who has all kinds of problems and you shouldn't be talking about anybody and you know it. So he just refuses to become a rational person on any level. And we're left with dealing with his blubber, right? And his little man syndrome. Okay, let's bring him up. We already kind of covered this. This is 1 Corinthians. Let me take me off for a minute. All right, let's go up to the Genesis 18 part. We talked about this. I let you talk a lot, Sam. I let you talk, and I will again. He never, of course, does this for me. I never, ever am afforded the same courtesy by Sam, right? It's a catastrophe. Total catastrophe. He just, at most, maybe he'll use a summary provided by someone else, and then he'll edit it out, or it's not complete. We'll get to that separately. We already did a little. But he's also doing a lot of weird facial things in that video. So, yeah, again, we have plenty of Sam coming up. No shortage whatsoever. We're looking for where we left off here. I was right at the Genesis 18. We talked about all this. The angel of the Lord stuff that he blows. He misquoted Bart Ehrman. Let me just move it a little faster. All right, we're getting a little closer. Yeah, right here. It's about right here. Let me see what he says.
Watch. I'm getting confused here. You see that? Lord Jesus Christ reigns. Are you enjoying this? I don't know if you remember me doing sessions on this, using his own words against him.
Let me back up and just make sure he didn't already say something here on this. I want to get the whole thing. I'm pretty sure it was right here of Genesis. This Genesis 18:19. Now, I have videos on both the angels who appear in Genesis 18 and the angels who appear in Genesis 19 on my channel. All you have to do, excuse me, is go to my channel and there's a little magnifying glass. I'm going to bring up Bible Hub here, by the way. A little magnifying glass. Then just type Genesis 18 or Genesis 19. They'll come right up, okay, because they're in the title of the video. I do have to go back and title some of my videos, especially the Angels of Jah series, all the different ones. I only kind of updated a couple, but I will. Anyway, gets a little dry. Been doing a lot of shows. All right, I have the Bible Hub up there for you guys. And I have Philo up there for us in a moment. So let's bring up Sam again. I'm going to take myself off so you can see the whole text of what he's reading, okay?
Appearing in human guise. Okay, now watch. I'm getting confused here. You see?
That's not surprising, but it is a concern if you're that confused and you're teaching us about the Bible. But I know you're just trying to be playful, even though you're a pervert. So keep going.
See that? Lord Jesus Christ reigns. Are you enjoying this? I don't know if you remember me doing sessions on this, using his own words against him. A similar ambiguity occurs 2 chapters.
He's talking about Bart Ehrman, by the way. He's not talking about me. Not right here.
Later, this time with Abraham. We are told in Genesis 18:1 that the Lord appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre. But when the episode is narrated, we learn that 3 men come to him. 8:2. Abraham plays the good host and entertains them, preparing for them a very nice meal, which they all 3 eat. When they talk to him afterward, one of these 3 men is identified explicitly as the Lord, all capitals meaning Yahweh. Look what he says, 18:13. At the end of the story, we informed the other 2 were angels, 19:1. So here we have a case where 2 angels and the Lord God himself have assumed human form, so much so that they appear to Abraham to be 3 men. They all eat the food he has prepared. See?
Okay, I wanted to get that part back in there. Okay, so, excuse me. This is important because this is also similar to how he made an error in part 1 when he erred about the whole equal to Yahweh, equal to God. And I literally used Philo to try to explain the context of thought existing at that time that Bart Ehrman could be thinking about, that many people think about or are aware of in terms of the Middle Platonic potential influence on people like John through Philo. So Sam didn't seem to have any concept of that or any idea that that could be at all what Bart Ehrman could have in mind, right? He's very superficial and shallow in his understanding of these things, like even right here, right? So with these, what he's citing right here, look at, assuming this is a correct quote, okay, again, he's supposedly quoting Bart Ehrman here. He is citing sources, but I'm just going with it on its face, right? If you've noted, if Sam does make any blatant misquotations and you want to share them with me, I will point that out. Otherwise, I'm going to give Sam the benefit of the doubt unless it's blatantly obvious or we discover it while we're doing the show that he's misquoting it. So right here, see how he's kind of highlighted that? And he's highlighting what he's allegedly quoting from Bart Ehrman. Here we have a case where 2 angels and the Lord God himself have assumed human form. So much so that they appear to Abraham to be 3 men. And they all eat the food he was prepared. This is very important you see this wording right here, okay? This wording is very important because you're going to see it in Philo. Two angels and the Lord himself have assumed human form, okay? Just remember that. That's often kind of what Trinitarians say. And so, once again, proof that Bart Ehrman did know Trinitarians believe that Jesus was, or that potentially could be identified with the Lord God himself as part of this group of three beings. Maybe not exactly the same as what he said originally in part one, but he's definitely at least showing an awareness here about some kind of understanding that would identify one of those three angels as God himself in human form. Can everybody see that? Assuming you can see that because it's right there. Let's let Sam continue.
That they appeared to Abraham to be three men. They all eat the food he has prepared. See that? This is pages 56, 57 of his book, How Jesus Became God. But let me read this part. The most famous instant.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do our Philo work here, okay? Because, I guess that's all he's really going to say about that. Now, Sam has often talked about that text and basically said what Bart Ehrman allegedly says right there. So for him, that's basically enough, right? That's what he usually tries to read that account to prove that one of those three is God. It gets a little confusing with them because they try to argue, as you know, see my videos on Genesis 18 and 19, but they try to argue, as you know, that all three of those are basically the Trinity, right? But that's not what Bart Ehrman said, is it? No, he said right here that it's two angels and the Lord himself. So he's not saying this is a Trinity, Sam. Again, remember I told you the wording here is very important. Okay, so Bart Ehrman, according to Sam, says right there, we have a case where two angels and the Lord himself have assumed human form. Okay? That should be clear. So look, let's now read from Philo. Now this is from his work, Questions and Answers on Genesis. It's an online archived copy of the Loeb Classical Edition. Let me see if I can make it a little clearer. It's an actual copy of the Loeb edition. So it's the actual text that's published that has, and this is not an easy book of Philo to get online, like a free edition. So that's why I took this archived version of the actual book that published this this book 4 of Questions and Answers on Genesis. But as you can see, it's kind of it's a PDF photocopy, so it's we'll make it so it's more readable. But first, let's get to the right page. So in any case, this is book 4 of the Loeb Classical Libraries edition of Philo. It would be like this, basically. Questions and Answers on Genesis. So I have the whole series right here, of course. This is an online copy that we can read from. So let me get to the part here where it begins, which is right here. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger. Huh. Oh, here we go. There we go. I'll remove myself. So, but before I do that, okay, so I know a lot about Philo. I've been studying him a long time and very seriously recently. I did a long time ago as well. I have a lot of his writings, different technical works, and the Studia Philonica Annual. I have almost every single volume. I've read all of them, of course. I've translated numerous sections of the Greek text of Philo's writings, but a lot of Philo's writings are preserved in Armenian. And a lot of them, there are a lot of Greek fragments, and there's some early, like Greek Okyrankus fragments dated to like the 3rd century, like between late 200s. But most of our texts are datable mostly to like 12th, but we'll say 10th to 16th century is probably a better range, or 12th to 16th. There's a lot of 12th to 14th century manuscripts. And again, I've gone through every significant writing in Philo, discussion and text even. It took a long time. And I've also dug down into all the manuscript readings and authorities. That took a long time. So when I'm done and I give you what I think you'll see is useful, you'll hopefully appreciate all the work that was done. In any case, I can use a lot of that for you right now and talk about a few things. So let's bring up Philo again. Now, you have to understand we're not dealing with a lot of ancient writings representative of Philo. We have some fragments and texts. There is a 6th century text of writing that's not as well known. It's called De Deo. It's Latin for of or about God. And this right here, this Studia Philonica annual volume. It's volume 10, 1998, part of the Brown Judaic Studies, number 319. It's the first translation of De Deo. And I'm going to read it from it to you about Genesis 18 and Isaiah 6, okay? But first, let's go back to questions and answers on Genesis and look at what Philo says about Genesis 18, which Sam just cited from Bart Ehrman as him allegedly contradicting himself because he said that God appeared himself as a man with 2 angels, which is not what Sam believes, not what the Trinity teaches. And yet somehow Sam believes Bart Ehrman contradicted himself when in fact Bart Ehrman actually wrote that Sam highlighted and doesn't understand contextually because, he's not really qualified for any of this, is very much like what you're going to see right here. Okay, I'll make it a little bigger. I think this is from page 270, section 2 of book 4. So I'll make it a little bigger and then we'll move it around. Let's see. Let's make it there. That's readable, huh? Make it even better. I should be able to move this around. Yeah. No? Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, good. I think that's... Excuse me. Apologize, I got a little dry right there. I got to not let that happen. That's my bad there. Let's see. I want to make it as readable as possible. That, I think, is good. Can I do it better? Yes. More? Okay. So here you go. Okay. This should be good. So let's read. This is from Philo, Middle Platonist Jew of the 1st century, writing during the time, basically, of the New Testament writers, potentially Jesus, during his life, and shortly thereafter, up to 50 CE. But we only have manuscripts that are, in terms of fragments, earliest 3rd century, and then full manuscript representation is really later translation Armenian, some 6th century, some early, but mostly 10th to 16th, okay? I give you a lot more data on the manuscripts for Philo and what I'm going to present to you soon, Philo, time, and the Trinity. But just for now, you have that information, okay? So doesn't mean it's not worth anything or useful. And many Trinitarians and others, writers before Trinitarians, use Philo and cite him. So there's not much question he existed. It's just we do need to be a little careful with his manuscripts. It's not the best tradition by far. And a lot of it is late. Okay. So in any case, a lot of it is consistent with what I think would be a foundational Middle Platonist Jewish view pre-Justin Martyr, Origen, and others. But some of it is also probably, and for sure, suspect, as many have determined. In any case, I talk more about that in my writing, so let's get to it right here. Book 4, Questions and Answers on Genesis, Philo of Alexandria, Section 2. Genesis 18:2. The question Philo is answering is, what is the meaning of the words, he saw and behold, 3 men were standing over him? Philo then goes on to answer. Most natural things to those who are able to see does Scripture present, namely, that it is reasonable for one to be 3, and for 3 to be 1, for they were one by a higher principle. Okay, now think about that for a minute. Most natural things to those who are able to see does Scripture present that it is reasonable for 1 to be 3 and for 3 to be 1, for they were one by a higher principle. But when counted with the chief powers, the creative and the kingly, he makes the appearance of 3 to the human mind. Now, do you all see that right there? So, something is being counted with the chief powers that are called the creative and the kingly. In the footnote, it cites the word for powers, again, dunamesi, not energies. But that's the same basic corresponding meaning with the orthopagans. There might be some slight difference in some discussions, but it's essentially the same thing. Philo in the New Testament uses powers, but they also try to say energies in the New Testament. It's not there, not the way they say it, or even in the plural, the way they say it at all. In any case, you can see right here, Philo says something is counted with the chief powers, the creative and the kingly. Now, as you're going to see, and as I've talked about elsewhere, that's the 2 powers, God and Lord. Okay? You remember, in Middle Platonism, Platonic thinking mixed with the Bible without the divine name, and all these energies and powers, and the Father is the monarchia, the monarch, the fountainhead from which all these energies and powers flow out into the created world and represent God or do what he wants without him actually being there. Then, so that's how God and Lord are viewed. They're not understood as the one all-powerful God. There is 2 chief powers, okay? It gets confusing, I know. That's why Justin Martyr says that the God and Lord in the Old Testament, that's not the beyond-all God. That's how stupid Sam is, because he just reads that, and all Sam is looking for is someone to say Jesus is God, or he's identified, like he's doing with Bart Ehrman right now, right? He's the God himself came, right? He has no real understanding of what's going on. He's just looking for the dumbest connection he can misinterpret and lie about the Trinity, right? No, this is what Philo believes as a Platonist Jew who sees those as both true, but doesn't use God's name because of Platonism and its unnameable God, or God, yeah. Especially Middle Platonism. So he says, when with the chief powers, creative and kingly, he makes the appearance of 3 to the human mind. So it's not real, it's an appearance right here. And there's a he. Who's this he? Okay. For this cannot be so keen of sight that it can see him, who is above the powers that belong to him, namely God. So right there, we can see Philo's Middle Platonism puts God as the monarchia, right? This is what they mean right here. When the orthopagans say monarchy of the Father, they mean this right here, okay? That God is beyond the powers, but they're still his powers. Just like in Platonism, the eternal forms are still the ideas in the mind of God, right? So this is how they're able to somehow see them as eternal. Like with the wisdom is eternal, even though it says it's created, they don't see it that way because they blow the whole time thing. They see it as an attribute in the mind of God without it actually being just the name of a real person, a spirit born from a spirit, because of things like this. And people like Philo and Middle Platonism and others come after him, right? So Philo sees God as above these powers. Remember, though, when he says God here, he doesn't mean God here. It gets confusing, I know. But orthopagans know it's true. So these chief powers, God and Lord, creative and kingly, you'll see that more clear in a moment, are not the same as this, okay? This is the Father, the monarch, the monarchia of the powers. But this is God, this creative power, that's God for Philo, right? Because of the whole non-nameable thing, he gets into Ha'on in a minute to distinguish this better. But right now it's confusing, isn't it? But he doesn't get confused because that's just how he believes. He understands what he's saying. The orthopagans and Trinitarians do too. So for them, this isn't confusing. For you, it will be though, right? Like it has to. Look, if the creative is God, and these are his two chief powers, how is God above God, right? Because God here is one of his powers. So is Lord right here. And he's the Father. Distinct from anything else, for so soon and above the powers, for so soon as one sets eyes upon God, there also appear together with his being. Okay, and you can see right here, J, or essence, ousia. Ousia. So, for as soon as one sets eyes upon God, there also appear together with his ousia, together with his essence, the ministering powers. Okay, that's these right here, the chief powers. And there are others, but these are the main ones. God and Lord, creative, kingly. Father's above all the powers. And then the Father is the one with the essence of being that has ministering powers. So it's the essence of the Father, and all the powers belong to him and are therefore also part of the essence, right? Because they're part of his nature, his being, his mind, right? These powers. So that's how they see him as connected with the essence and therefore eternal, because they're literally a part of his nature or being, his makeup, right? His attributes, which they reify into really existing personalized powers that he uses to essentially do things outside of the realm of ideas, the eternal realm of forms, and effect things in the created world that don't require him to enter into it. He can stay in the realm of ideas. And again, things still happen sequentially. It's just not created in the same way that the generative physical world is considered as created. So there's a difference, and I've talked about this before, but we're going to get into it even more, again, especially in my book. Right here, let's go to the top, though. Continuing the reading, right? So from where we left off, just to make sure, I didn't mean to keep us from forgetting there. There also appeared together with his being the ministering powers, so that in place of one, he makes the appearance of a triad, right? All right, that's almost Trinity right there, right? But it's not. And this is really where this is probably the earliest, I would say, close thing to a Trinity that they're talking about later, but it's not at all like it. It's just, it has some elements, right? Again, the triad here is the beyond all God, the essence, the Ha'on, as you're going to see, but the ousia that he said, and the two chief powers, God and Lord. It's not Father, Son, Holy Spirit for Philo. He's talking about a triad as God as the above all essence and his two chief ministering powers. That when he appears to people in their mind, not really, we read that, he uses a triad. Now he's going to go on and explain why he does that, okay? There's a reason he does that. It's not the Trinity that comes about later. But now, hopefully, you can see why my book's titled the way it is, right? Philo, time, and the Trinity. You have to see this. For when the mind begins to have an apprehension of the existent one, it gives us a footnote to ontos, right? So it's very similar to haon, just a different form, but basically saying the same thing. And over here, as we read before, remember, when counted with the chief powers, the king, creative and kingly, he makes the appearance of three to the human mind, okay? Remember that. Because you cannot be so keen of sight to see him who is above the powers that belong to him, namely God. For as soon as one sets his eyes on God, there also appear together with his being the ministering powers. In place of one, he makes the appearance of a triad, appears to the mind. For when the mind begins to have an apprehension of the existent one, he is known to have arrived there, making himself unique and appearing as chief and sovereign. And then he says, but as I said a little earlier, he cannot be seen in his oneness without something else, because you can't see God. The chief powers that exist immediately with him, namely the creative, which is called God, and the kingly, which is called Lord. Now ask yourself, do you believe that as a biblical Christian? Do you believe that God is the existent one, ahaon, or the tuontos, who has two chief powers, that he is above and that minister to him, and that the existing one's chief powers are the creative, called God, and the kingly, called Lord? Do you all believe that? Do all you biblical Christians out there believe that? You want to know who believes that? Well, the ortho-pagans basically believe something like this. I mean, they may not, again, use the exact same terminology and distinction, including powers and energies that Philo does, but it's very similar, if not the same, conceptually, because, again, and they also have the Christian element involved, so Philo does not. But they're basically, yes, the ortho-pagans are basically in line with this. That's why you see J. Dyer talking about God logic, adopting Trinitarian monarchianism, but not really believing it, okay? So the ortho-pagans believe in monarchianism, which is from Philo, even though they have a different form of it now, but it's from Philo. And a lot of this is still consistent with what they believe. But this is not really consistent with God logic, is it right? I don't think God logic believes this, that there are these powers or energies that the father, the monarch, is the fountainhead of, and that flow from him as the means by which he accomplishes things that he wants to do from the realm of eternal ideas and forms in the physical world. I don't think so, right? I don't think Protestants, I don't think Catholics, I don't think anyone but the ortho-pagans are really like this. And again, it's not exactly like this, but it's close enough to where If you understand this, now you understand why they talk the way they do. There's a lot more, but this is where they're getting the monarchia, the monarchian view of the Trinity. This is it, basically, from Philo, but it changes in the whole Christian sense a little bit. So they can't use Philo as a basis for saying that he believed in the Trinity. This is not the Trinity of Nicaea. Not even close, right? And again, I've shown that the Logos as well is not eternal in the way they view it, and they don't believe the full Middle Platonism of Philo. It's just not. They don't adopt it all. Okay, nor do they adopt the full Middle Platonism of Justin Martyr, Origen, Clement of Alexandria. They often will cite all these people, of course, but they don't really believe the whole thing. That's why they condemn a lot of them. Although some, like Justin Martyr, they just misunderstand it, right? They just misinterpret a lot of stuff, like you saw in Inspiring Philosophy and Jake Brancatella, right? They misinterpret. If you saw that, Jake caught him there a couple years ago, and it was very good. And they've been misquoting that a lot. Anyway, let's continue. For when Scripture says he lifted up his eyes, talking about Genesis 18, Abraham, this means not those of the body. You understand? This is Philo interpreting Genesis 18 in a Middle Platonist Jewish view that is totally different from the Trinity of later Christian paganism, even though it uses a triad because it's talking about an appearance God makes, not a real appearance. Philo thinks all of this whole account in Genesis 18 that Abraham is experiencing with these three men, he thinks all of it is not really happening. He talks about it even more in a minute. It's all just happening in his mind, okay? God is using a triad, himself, the existing one, tuontos, and the two chief powers, the two chief ministering powers, creative and royal, God and Lord, that are not him. This is where Sam makes his mistake, right? So see, when Sam sees Jesus, or especially in Justin, right, identified as the God of the Old Testament, he doesn't understand that, like in Philo right here for Justin, God and Lord are not the existing one, Sam. Right? This guy has said so many dumb things about Philo, Justin Martyr, Origen, and we all just laugh at him, because he just can't figure out these things. Now, I think the way I've explained it now, I've been studying Philo enough and I know enough, and of course, Sam will never give me the credit that he should, even though he learns everything from me, like right now, right? I guarantee you everything I just said and presented has given him his best understanding. All this time he's been spending trying to figure out the energies and powers so he can talk to Jay Dyer and other people. I guarantee you what I just presented has given him his clearest understanding yet. He'll never thank me for it, though, just like he'll never thank me for being a proper parent to him and holding him accountable for his weight. Right? Nope. I never get credit for that stuff, even though it motivates him, as we all know. So, yeah, no, when Sam, he doesn't understand any of this, right? He's like, you can't even really talk to him because in his mind, being called the God or Lord of the Old Testament has to mean you're Yahweh, right? The guy literally laughed at me when him and his idiot followers, when they heard me say that with Jake Brancatella. I saw some of them do a video, and they didn't understand what I just showed you from Philo, that you can be called the God of the Old Testament and not be the beyond all God, like literally right here, right? So remember, we're dealing with a low-level person almost always, and especially with Sam. He's been through a lot, he's got a lot of experience, but he's ultimately a dum-dum. He lifted up his eyes. This means not those of the body. Not really happening. It's not possible to see God. Sam! Never happened, pal. But those of the soul, Sam. Keep lying. Not even contemporary and Philo is that really happening in the Old Testament. For in the moment of wisdom, he is seen with the eyes. Moment of wisdom, Sam. But the sight of many ignoble and idle souls is always blocked, since they are in deep sleep and are never able to leap up and rouse themselves to things of nature and to the sights and impressions therein. But the spiritual eyes, Sam, of the virtuous man that you are not, are awake and see. Ha ha! Or rather, he is sleepless because of his desire of seeing, and he spurs himself and leaps up to wakefulness. Wake up, Sam. Have a donut, or 50 of them, right? Maybe a Krispy Kreme specialty. Wherefore it was well said in the plural that he opened not one eye, but all the eyes which are in the soul. Eyes of the soul, Sam. So that he was altogether an eye. And having become an eye, he begins to see the sovereign, holy and divine vision in such a way that the single appearance appears as a triad and the triad as a unity. Oh boy, did they really, the later pagans, right, even many Middle Platonists between Philo and Nicaea, they really latch on to this, everyone. But as I've shown, and we have proof to see, it is not the same Trinity, and it's not even really happening. It's an appearance for the sake of those who are able to see. It's not. It's for the sake of an appearance, a vision, because no one can actually see. Where did it say that? Right. It's not possible to actually see God through the senses, but those of the soul. So he goes on to say, having become an eye, begins to see sovereign, holy, divine wisdom in such a way that he single appearance is a triad as a unity. It is fitting to speak of what follows, so that means the existing one, God and Lord, the two creative chief ministering powers, and the beyond all God, Father, the monarch. It is fitting to speak of what follows these words and not omit them. Speak of what follows. For not idly is it said that they stood over him. For God is above and over all generated creatures. So here is where you get that distinction again with this is talking almost always about physical creations that are distinct from the realm of the ideas and eternal forms where God is and his powers are. That even though they are activated or sequentially, in one case, eternal abstractions in God's mind that then, when he wants to do something, become an archetype or a plan that is then affected through the powers, right? So there's sequentiality there. There is time there. It's just not in the physical sense in which all generated physical creatures experience time. Very clear from Philo. I have a whole video on it if you'd like to look it up. Just search Philo on my channel. It'll come up. Larger video and a smaller one. For God is above all generated creatures, and so are the divine powers that administer and oversee and govern. Okay, so right there, you see? So you have God in Philo. He's above all generated creatures, physical creations. And the divine powers that administer and oversee and govern, what he uses. Right? So wisdom, mercy, royalty, creativeness. These are all for Philo, these powers that are not the Father whose powers these are, but they are divine and eternal and personal, right? Nonetheless, in a way that allows them not to have more than one God, but one God who's the monarch, the Father, with all these divine powers. Now, generally, everything necessary has already been said for concerning the activity of things. It is proper to see a vision in no casual manner. With a single turning of the eyes, the mind apprehends a double appearance. The one was of God coming with his two highest powers. That's what he's talking about with Genesis 18, by which he is served. namely the creative, through which he creates and operates the world, that's God, and the kingly, through which he rules what has come into being, Lord. Neither one of those are God. So you see, when Sam doesn't understand, when Bart Ehrman is talking about the two angels appearing with God himself in human form, he's not talking about what you're talking about, Sam. Almost for sure. And even if he is, you're showing no awareness of the potential, even likelihood, I believe, that he's talking about this right here. God appearing, Sam, with his two chief divine ministering powers. So he can say, Sam, that God himself is appearing as a man in this exact way Philo's talking about, which is not really happening because you can't see God according to Philo. We just read it. And this is an appearance in the eyes of the soul. We just read it. But it's still a way that God can appear as a man to people with two angels, according to Bart Ehrman, which are God's two chief powers in Philo. So I don't understand why you think Bart Ehrman contradicted himself or in some way helped you. Doesn't seem like it. And if anything, he had something like this in mind, which definitely doesn't agree with you, right? It's definitely not how you understand God or his two chief ministering powers, right? And Sam, you know, it's funny. Sam often doesn't seem to understand the two powers. The two powers, Sam, are not God, the beyond all God. No, one is God, one is Lord, but not the beyond all God, either one of them. So, you know, he gets so lost in the sauce sometimes with just the words, right? The words sometimes, that's all Sam needs to hear, and all he can think of is Trinity. Right, so right here, going back to what he says, generally everything necessary already been said concerning activity of things is proper see a vision. Casual man, let me check real quick though, right? Let me make sure you guys are doing okay. We could have pervasion from some people. Trinity 96, you like Krispy Kreme? Me too. I'm hungry right there. Codex Archivist, good to see you. Choker, nice. Betsy, okay, good. Let's get back to it. Looks like everything's in compliance there. No full perv out. Good job, Sam. Just listen, Sam. I'm giving you energies and power stuff. Do you want it or not? I don't know what else to tell you, man. It's all right here. Right? Sam. Things proper, see a vision. With a single turn of the eyes, the mind apprehends a double appearance. One of God coming with his two highest powers by which he is served, namely the creative, God, through which he creates and operates the world, and the kingly, Lord, through which he rules what has come into being. The other, talking about physicality, all generated creatures. And the other appearance was that of the strange men. Not such men as one may happen to meet by chance, but most perfect of body according to human nature and of venerable holiness. Again, it's still the other appearance. And being struck by other appearance, he was drawn towards seeing now by one, now by the other. And he was not able to see just which of them, talking about the men, the strange men, the three men, was likely to be the true one. For the sake of safety, he's telling you right here why God appeared to him as three men. Because he was trying to protect him. Okay, both doing it as a vision, and so he couldn't fully identify the one that was really him, which would be the equivalent of God himself becoming a man, Sam, in what Bart Ehrman wrote, which you don't seem to understand contextually or even potentially like this. And he was not able to see just which of them was likely the true one. For the sake of safety and because of uncertainty and doubt, he did not ignore either of them, nor did he, like some, out of slothfulness, forget them, but received and apprehended. He might be talking about the other appearance. There are a couple appearances of these men in Genesis 18. Both appearances, he's referring to both here, thinking it better to accustom his doubt by truth rather than falsehood to the acquisition of two great virtues, namely holiness and love of mankind. Holiness insofar as his gaze was fixed upon the one aspect in which he saw God. The love of mankind in the other aspect, which is common participation with strangers, and that he was moved by either appearance is clear from Scripture. For whatever is said concerning one or to one or by one is brought as evidence of an appearance as God, while whatever is said concerning several or to several is of an appearance as of strange men. For when it says God appeared to him, and Lord, if indeed I have found favor before thee, and do not pass over thy servant, and thou do as thou hast said, and when it is said again to him, where is Sarah thy wife? And again, I will come to thee at this time. And God said to him, why did Sarah laugh? All these passages point to his appearance as God, but the following indicate an appearance as of strange men. Let me just make sure what section we're on here. Are we still? Yes. Okay, good. Back to that same part. And if lifting his eyes he looked, and 3 men were standing over him, and he ran to them, and let your feet be washed, and refresh yourselves under the tree, and eat. And he stood before them, and the men got up from there. So that through both piety and love of man, Scripture guides everyone who is considered civilized. For in such civilized manner did the founder and chief of our race make his way of life an example, seeing the vision before his eyes which was not constant, being at one time that of God, at another time that of strangers, he decided to show piety as toward God, and equal oneness and love of man toward strangers. Some, taking this as a point of departure, have gone astray in their beliefs. They've been struck by the notion that there are measure and weights of proportion and structure, as the clever and considerably learned Homer. He names Homer, quotes him right here, and says, in relation to Genesis 18, with beauty of sound, describes the conduct of life, talking about Homer. It is not right to be harmfully arrogant. For he says that the deity, see, he's directly utilizing Homer's concept of deity, because again, for him, it's not inaccurate in the Platonic sense in which he can utilize it here. The deity in the likeness of a beautiful human form is believed to appear many times. And this is not diverging from the belief of a polytheist. So he's saying this isn't diverging in this from a polytheist. In other words, he's able to cite him here consistently, and Homer still be a polytheist. In other words, Philo can still use this and not fully agree with Homer's polytheism. His verses are as follows, because Homer wasn't a Jew like Philo. And yet the gods, in the likeness of strangers from other lands, in all lands or form, go about unknown, seeing and beholding the many enmities of men and their lawlessness, and also their good laws. Right there. And this is also clear from elsewhere in Philo. He refers to them as gods, everybody. The appearance of the deity in these human forms. And he parallels it with something said from Homer, where that's the case with the gods, without adopting his polytheism. Because again, he sees this more as the monarch of the Father utilizing his powers, which are, he's above, right? So they're not him, but they're a part of his nature and eternal in terms of his ideas and the abstractions of his mind, which he can use to effect things in the created world. Now, just to finish off this thought with Philo, this is from, again, Studia Philonica Annual, Volume 10, 1998. So the first translation of Philo's work, De Deo, and I'll be quoting from, I'm just going to read a brief quote here, but it parallels what we were just talking about, page 5, from the first article by Volker Siegert, The Philonian Fragment De Deo, first English translation. So from page 5, section 4. Listen to this, okay? Just briefly, this dovetails with what we were just talking about. I'll put up, I'll keep it here, yeah. Right here, page 5, section 4. The one in their midst is called being, on. So while in question answers on Genesis, the Greek, which may be the Greek translation of the author of the Armenian, sometimes it quotes Greek fragments, but it usually says that. So a lot of times the footnotes in the Armenian-based manuscript translations are Greek translations by the translator to kind of give a better idea or understanding. Sometimes they'll do Latin too, of the Armenian, right? So you got to be careful what you rely on there. Anyway, section 4, the one in their midst is called being, own. The name being is not his own and proper name. For he himself is unnameable and beyond expression, okay? He does not believe God has a name, just like the actual Bible has God's name over and over again. And so this is where you get this whole non-use of the name from the Middle Platonism of people like Philo and others who don't believe he has one or could even have one. So he doesn't even believe Ha'on, the being, is his name. He doesn't have a name. God and Lord are the two chief created powers, not the beyond all God. Sam is gone. He himself is unnameable, beyond expression, as being incomprehensible. But inasmuch as he is named the being. Of his two bodyguards, on either side, one is God, the other Lord. The former being the symbol of the creative, the latter the royal virtue. Then here, he quotes from Exodus 25, concerning the 3 men, it seems to me that this oracle of God has been written in the law. And then he quotes page 5 of the Studia Philharmonica Annual, Volume 10. He quotes Exodus 25, I will speak to you above the mercy seat from between two cherubim. Okay? So Philo right here in Dedeo, this is based on a 6th century Armenian text, by the way. So it's earlier than most Armenian texts of Philo we have. First translated in 1998. So right here he says, in addition to what we already read about the two chief bodyguards, creative and royal, he also says God's unnameable. Not even Ha'on is the name, or On. Then he says that the 3 men of Genesis 18 are like the 3 in Exodus 25, where God says, I'll speak to you above the mercy seat, above 2 cherubim. This is what I mentioned in my Philo video and another text where I talk about John 1:1 and how Philo believes that, like he's telling you right here, that the angels, at least in the Genesis account, he's paralleling them with the 2 cherubim of the mercy seat because he identifies them as God and Lord, like I said in my other video. So God and Lord for Philo are 2 cherubim, okay? And he's saying that the 3 men in Genesis 18, one is Ha'on. The other 2 are his 2 chief powers. And they're cherubim. And he quotes Exodus 25, where it says, I'll speak to you from above the 2 cherubim. And then Philo says, as these powers are winged, they fittingly thrown on a winged chariot over the whole cosmos. Hey, Sam. Cherubim are on a chariot flying over the whole cosmos. Did you know that? Yeah, it's not just the Son of Man and Judeo belief contemporary with the Bible. You've got it all wrong on so many levels, though. It's catastrophe. The Father above the powers does not himself depend on anything. Monarchianism again. But everything depends on him. That would include the powers. And so, again, Philo does not believe in a Trinitarianism like they do today, because the dependency would show they're not actually, in the same way Trinitarians believe today, of the same nature. They are in Philo in some sense, but it's not exactly like the orthopagans believe today. Because, again, well, I mean, they still see these angels in some way as not created other than, yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to... The orthopagans have nothing to do with the Bible, okay? Just understand that. And they're not really in agreement with Philo, even though he's a Middle Platonist, because, I guess they could come up with a way of saying that everything depends on the Father as the fountainhead. So again, the whole monarchia is their catch-all explanation. They get to, in their view, preserve this eternal connection of the powers with the Father and still be Trinitarian. Has nothing to do with the Bible, right? But good luck to you anyway with that. And of course, as you see, Philo, in order to preserve even something like what they believe, can't even have a named God. So good luck with the Hebrew text and, of course, the actual Bible, right? Not the redacted copies. For he alone, he says that everything depends on him. He alone is the support and column of the universe. The text says, referring to Exodus 25, the text says, it is from above that he who is in the middle speaks, because the being has ordered the universe by his word, and the universe has been made vocal and rational by his providence. See, again, we have activity in the spirit realm, sequentiality, just not creation in the generated physical sense that he also distinguishes the realm of forms and ideas from. Made vocal by his providence, in the midst of whom he is found. The text shows clearly by calling them cherubim. One of these is ascribed to the creative power and rightly called God. He's talking about a cherub, Sam. He's saying that one of the cherubim above the mercy seat in Exodus 25, well, they're both cherubim, but one of them is rightly called God. The other, to the sovereign and royal virtue, is called Lord. This is what I meant by part one, and also right here where Sam doesn't understand Bart Ehrman's reference to God, or the God himself doing something, which isn't even a real thing. It's an appearance and only for the sake of protecting people because you can't see him, right? It has nothing to do with what Sam is talking about, and yet he equated everything in a way that would essentially give Bart Ehrman no option, right? It either has to mean what Sam means, which means Trinity, or nothing, right? Like the handstand he's doing in the picture. Look, last section, section 6, page 6. The vision woke up the prophet Isaiah. Okay, now we're getting to Isaiah 6. Sam, Jesus Christ reigns, listen up. Woke up the prophet Isaiah and caused him to rise. He took a share in what is higher than the whole, the divine spirit. Poured down from on high, the prophetic spirit becomes ecstatic and is moved like a cherubim. The prophet says, I saw the Lord sitting on a high throne, quoting Exodus 6. Isaiah 6. And the house was filled with his glory, and seraphim stood around him. Both of them had 6 wings. With 2 they covered their face, and with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. This isn't online, so I had to get it from my collection and from the writings here. Recent translation. Good manuscript support, relatively speaking, though, with Philo. Seraphim stood about him. Both of them had 6 wings, and 2 they covered their face. With 2 they covered their feet. 2 they flew. Philo says seraphim is translated patterns or burning, names that are suitable for the powers. So right here, Sam and Jesus Christ reigns, Philo says the seraphim are powers. And he identified the cherubim as powers, God and Lord. So you guys in your whole seeing glory, even contemporary with Philo, has nothing to do with Trinitarian seeing of glory in the context of Isaiah 6, which has nothing to do with John 12, of course. But even if it did, right? God is a cherub, and the seraphs are powers. And he says, since these powers are forms and seals with which the Creator patterned the world, marking and engraving on each being its proper qualities, right there you have activity and time. Listen again. Seraphim is translated patterns or burning, names that are suitable for the powers. Since these powers are forms and seals with which the Creator patterned the world, again extending to the creative order, marking and engraving on each being its proper qualities. So in other words, God affects the powers in order for them to be suitable for him to do what he wants in the created world. Right there, you have the powers themselves, as the seraphim in Isaiah 6, being temporally affected by God in order to do things in the physical world. Again, seraphim translated patterns or burning, names that are suitable for the powers. Since these powers are forms and seals with which the Creator patterned the world, marking and engraving on each being its proper qualities. For this reason, they were named patterns, but they were named burning because they transform the disorder and confusion of matter to excellence of order, by which formless being turns into form and disorder into order. For they are not powers of a destructive fire, but of a saving one, by which the universe has been artistically fashioned. Now, it might even be here that he's saying that these seraphim powers are eternal, because at least in the sense in which he sees them as part of the nature of God or as part of his actual powers. Because when he says it says names that are suitable for the power, since these powers are forms and seals which the Creator patterned, with which the Creator patterned the world, okay, marking and engraving on each being. That might be a reference actually to the beings in the world there. Initially, it seemed like he was saying he affected the powers. That, upon closer reading, it might not have been saying that. It could be referring to the marking and engraving on each being its proper qualities. It's a little oddly worded, but I don't want to be too definitive thinking about it a little bit more. But in any case, he's referring directly to the seraphim. So again, with the orthos, you get this sort of eternal powers, energies, even for angels or cherubim or seraphim, okay? They're nothing like what you read in the Bible about the angels being made spirits, all other creations, right? Which is the powers and the angels and lordships, right? Everything. They don't really believe that. I mean, it gets kind of weird when you talk to them, but effectively, if they're going to say that the seraphim and the cherubs are creations, well, then creations happen in the eternal realm of eternal forms. And so your whole idea of it being separate from the generated order that's outside of the eternal forms of God is defeated on its face. And that's essentially why the orthos don't like the way that, a lot of these other groups talk, not only because of that, but because the way they talk, it just doesn't, the orthos can't make sense of that. The orthos can't make sense of this kind of all this creation happening in the realm of eternal realm of ideas and forms in the mind of God. They can only really have this sort of activation, you might say, of the powers that are there eternally as forms. And then when God's ready to do something, they're basically they become active. That's the only real kind of sequentiality I think they could come to. But they're actually called creations in the Bible, both angels and powers. So again, you have to ultimately understand you believe the Bible, don't you? Okay, well, they don't. They believe in Plato's theory of eternal forms and the Bible and a redacted Bible at that and a nameless God at that, like you just read from Philo. That's true with all these other pagans as well, by the way. So there's a lot of stuff here, isn't there, everyone? That's just one small section. I have so much more for you on Philo and all these angels and powers and time and all this stuff. Trinity, right? Trinity, we saw triad, right? 3, right? 1 and 3. No Trinity. No, you guys don't really believe that, do you? You guys don't really believe what Philo tried to show you using Homer right here, right? Or that he creates the world with 2 powers, right? One of those powers is God, one is Lord, and he's beyond them all, right? He's above them all. Well, that's what the orthos believe. So whenever you say monarchia of the Father, you're basically saying that. You may not believe it, but then you've come up with your own definition of the monarchia of Trinitarianism that is probably not like the orthos, unless it's very much like what I just read for you and described from Philo, and which isn't much different, but is a little different with later Christian Middle Platonists that then become the basis for later Trinitarianism, and of course, the full-blown orthopaganism, right? For Protestants and Catholics, they use a lot of this stuff, but they don't really conceive of it the way we just talked about it, and that Middle Platonists like Philo and later Middle Platonists and the orthopagans do. They'll just use it to try to prove the Trinity in the sense in which they've come to accept it as Father, Son, Holy Spirit, 3 persons sharing the same nature co-eternally without any division or temporality. That's all they care about, right? As long as the orthopagans give them something that ultimately leads to that, they don't care. The orthopagans, though, they care. They don't like it when you start talking outside of this whole Middle Platonic Christianized paganism. Okay? That's what you're seeing with this whole God Logic, Jay Dyer thing right now. All right. So, yeah, we're going to actually go back to Sam. Can you believe it? Right? We don't need to spend a ton of time, but because what he's going to get to here, we've discussed many times. And even in this very series, what he's going to get to right here. He already brought up this Exodus 3 burning bush stuff. This came up in part 2, I think it was. We talked a lot about Exodus 3, in fact. We read the account, and then we went to Acts 7, where it refers to the account. So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time with Sam right here, but let's let him go through it. Let him say what he has to say. We'll comment on it, and then we'll wrap it up. And then we'll come back tomorrow for part 7. We'll try to wrap it up. I'm not gonna rush it though, because there's so much good stuff to prove he doesn't belong in this discussion. He never did. He was just used by the wrong people for the wrong reasons, and they can't get rid of him now, and he's a catastrophe. So it's good for us, though, because they've made him popular, and he doesn't deserve it. But we'll destroy him and make it clear to everybody, no, God is not a Trinity, and you guys are liars, and you follow paganism. Some of you may be nice, and we understand it's not easy, and we don't dislike Trinitarians just because you believe in the Trinity. It's because of people like this, okay? It's because of people like this that continuously lie to other people just so they can feel better about their fake God.
Of such ambiguity is found in the story of Moses and the burning bush, Exodus 3, 122. By way of background, Moses, son of the Hebrews, had been raised in Egypt by the daughter of Pharaoh, but he has to escape from murdering an Egyptian and is wanted by the Pharaoh himself. He goes to Midian, where he marries and becomes a shepherd for his father-in-law's flocks. Okay. One day, while tending to his sheeply duties, Moses sees astonishing sight. We are told that he arrives at Mount Horeb. This is Mount Sinai, where later, after the Exodus, he is given the law, and there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. Exodus 3:2. Moses is amazed because the bush is aflame, but is not being consumed by the fire. Despite the fact that it is the angel of the Lord who is said to have appeared to him, it is the Lord who sees that Moses has come to the bush, and it is God who then calls to him out of the bush. In fact, the angel of the Lord tells Moses.
Okay, and what did we just read from Philo, right? About God and Lord. Okay? That they're not God. They're not the on or the ontos, the two ontos, the being. God and Lord are his two chief ministering powers, right? This is what he doesn't understand. So, and the angel of the Lord is one of those powers too. None of those that he's looking at right here are the being, the beyond all God, the Father. But he doesn't understand any of that, okay? All Sam is trying to look for are references that say it is God. Like, I'll remove myself and look at what you see. That's third sentence. It is God who then calls out, right? So even though the top sentence correctly says it's the angel of the Lord or an angel, like we read in part 2, it is the Lord, right? Just like in Acts 7, it says it's an angel. But then the Lord speaks because why? Just like we read in Exodus 23 and elsewhere, the angel speaks, but they're God's words. They cannot figure this out, everybody. This is fundamentally stupid on their part and shows the Father's blinding them, because only that explains this level of depravity, right, over something like this. Just remember, he's not comprehending any of that at all as a contemporary option for interpreting God and Lord in what he's reading from Bart Ehrman. He's a catastrophe.
I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Okay, I'm confused.
Right, you're confused because it's actually an angel talking, but it's God's words. So the angel's speaking God's words. Hey, Sam, did you know if you go to Isaiah, I actually made it easy for you. You can either watch a video I did or you can read a blog I did. Yeah. And you can just look at every single verse where there's a narrative change because I show them all. And there's so many in Isaiah where he comes right out and says he's God. Yeah. Like the first and everything, the highest level of I am this you can imagine. It's Isaiah talking. He literally switches back and forth and there's no break at all. Did you know that? Right, and no one is stupid enough to confuse him with God. Just like no one was stupid enough to confuse these angels with God. Not even Philo. He sees them as his two chief ministering powers that are used by him to keep him from actually coming into contact with the physical world. And none of this is even really happening, right? It's all an appearance in your mind, and you don't have a mind, and it appears that you're gone.
He just told you, the angel said, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Right, because the account has the angel speaking for God. Because the angel doesn't speak his own words, he speaks God's words. That's what angels do. It's even what humans do. In fact, Sam, did you know Isaiah does it more than any angel anywhere in the Bible? Yeah, I even wrote it all out for you. You couldn't miss it if you tried, but since you're not trying, you miss it all.
What?
Yeah, you better hit that head 100 times. You're never going to figure this out, Sam. You and Jesus, Lord Jesus Christ reigns, your protege, your cohort. You two are never, ever, ever going to figure this out. You can just stop anytime, okay? You're never, ever, ever going to figure out that there's an angel here speaking for and as God. But the angel really isn't God. Not even in Philo, who thinks it's one of the chief powers, Lord or God. Even then, right? Right. So Bart Ehrman could be thinking just like that because it's just like that that Philo talks, and you're baffled beyond belief, not only because you'll never ever figure out, you or Lord, never. It's too complicated, dude. It's never going to happen, even though God explicitly stated, the angel will speak my words. Right? Even then, you two will never, ever unlock this mystery. Okay? Save yourself the time. It's not happening. Okay? Baffle yourself, Sam. Let's see you baffle yourself over this some more. Right?
As the story continues, the Lord God continues to speak to Moses and Moses to God. But in what sense was it the angel of the Lord that appeared to him? A helpful note in the HarperCollins Study Bible puts it, although it was an angel that appeared in verse 2, there is no substantive difference between the deity and his agents. Wrong.
The deity and his agents. And that could also be true with what we just read from Philo with the being and his powers, the Father and the monarchia. There's no substantive difference, if by substantive you mean like the nature, because there's powers. So again, you're completely failing to understand this in any kind of Middle Platonic or Philo sense, which is contemporary with the documents Bart Ehrman is discussing. And so it's just a catastrophe on all levels how you failed to properly contextualize what he's saying, what he could potentially be meaning, and you think somehow you've caught him, right? Catastrophic, dude.
But nonetheless, look what he says. Or as New Testament scholar Charles Gieshin has expressed it, this angel of the Lord is either indistinguishable from God as his visible manifestation.
Okay, and that's again, that could be exactly like what the ortho-pagans believe, whether it's visible in a real sense or an appearance sense. That's how they understand it, as the powers related to Philo, which, even though again isn't biblical, he's not even though he believes in the monarchia, right? This guy is so gone. He's not even offering the monarchia and the powers to like make sense of this. He's just ramming Bart Ehrman and the quotes that he's presenting from him into some conflict with the Trinity that he can't figure out unless Jesus is a person of God like he believes. He's gone.
Or he's a distinct figure separate from God who's bestowed with God's own authority.
Okay, so he said it's one or those others, Sam. I'll take myself what he says. He says, Bart Ehrman quotes the scholar Charles Gieshin and says the angel is either indistinguishable from God as his visible manifestation. In other words, Sam, why couldn't that just be like him as his image? Jesus is the image of the invisible God. He says right here, indistinguishable from God as his visible, not invisible, Sam. So you've misquoted him again. You made it seem like this made him indistinguishable from God in a divine nature sense, when it's specifically about his visible. So as either a man or in some sense manifested. Doesn't make it more clear there. We're clearly talking about visible. So it doesn't mean indistinguishable from God in a non-visible sense, Sam. It means as his image right there, which could be, again, exactly like Colossians 1:15, the image. The image is indistinguishable. That's the whole point of the image, even though it is different because it's an image. And every image is different from the original. Even in Philo, he says those very words. We'll get to them another time. And or is a distinct figure from God. So there's really two options there, Sam. You spent all that time, right, literally bringing us to an either or option, neither one of which agree with your view. And yet you chose to create a conflict that doesn't exist apart from your miscontextualizing everything we just read, if it was quoted properly, from Bart Ehrman. It's going to take a while to get through all your stuff, Sam. We'll go ahead and stop right there, though, and we'll pick up right here tomorrow, everybody. We're just going to keep going. Hour 2, minute 50, right there at Since Bart Ehrman Believes. We'll pick up right after that bold quote up there. We've totally blown him out in his failure to understand, right? Genesis 18, Exodus 3, angels speaking for and as God, humans, right? This guy's crazy. So he doesn't understand all angels are created in the Bible. All powers are created in the Bible. And there are no energies in the Bible the way the ortho-pagans believe, or even taught explicitly in any way about God. There is powers. They're all created in terms of the angels who are submitted to God, to Jesus, and of course prior to that to him. And then he has his own attributes that aren't real things, but are attributed to him based on his actions and the things that he does or is that others can see or that are manifest from him, and that are defined like love in the books of the Bible, not as real things, but as attributes that are, as I just said, definable based on how you act or exist, not because you actually have a real thing called love, a real thing called wisdom. That's what the ortho-pagans and Platonists like them believe. So we follow the Bible, the best available reasons, and we do not believe Platonism is consistent with them at all. They do, and that's why they don't have a name God. That's why they removed his name from the Old and New Testaments, and they go with the Greek translation. They come up with all these beliefs about the powers and energies of God, a nameless God, and they're in schism with the Catholics and Protestants who have a different God that they all claim is the same God, related to the councils under the pagan emperor, starting with Constantine. I highly recommend you stay with what is written, especially since we have so much available today, even though much of it is redacted, especially with the divine name. And hopefully now you understand better why these later Middle Platonists reinterpreted the Bible beyond what was written, just like those before them. So it shouldn't be a big surprise, especially since the evidence is so clear. Let me say hi to people here before we go. I will pick up tomorrow. I'll be back tomorrow, everybody, as we continue, right? Just the ongoing devastation of Sam and his catastrophic belief system, right? It's pretty bad, right? Some Trinitarians have they do a decent job of explaining their beliefs, and they actually at times make sense. I just don't believe they're biblical. Sam is not only not biblical in his beliefs, he doesn't make any sense. The ortho-pagans are the wildest and the furthest away from the Bible, but they think they're the original Christians. Make that make sense. In either case, I will be back tomorrow for more of all of this until we wipe out Sam's video from existence. Continue on to the next one. We'll also mix it up a little bit. Once we finish this video, let's get this. I don't care if we have to do 10 parts. Let's wipe this one out, okay? Let's get rid of this stain, right? Just blow it out and use it to promote the truth in all these ways. Make tons of clips, pound Sam into oblivion, expose his fake God, help all those who are sincere, even Trinitarians who disagree with us if they're sincere. We'll try to work with you. We can't work with Sam. He's a belligerent demoniac who has to be stopped because he's defaming God nonstop and he's a pervert. He's also a child abuser. So there's plenty of reasons to stop Sam, okay? It should have happened a long time ago. Either way, he provides us with a lot of laughs and you're giving us great material, Sam. Sam, you're bringing us together. Many people are contacting me. They love it all. They want to meet. We're going to pray. We're going to bind you hand and feet till the master comes. Out of here, right? Everybody, you have a wonderful evening. You have a wonderful evening. Enjoy yourselves. I'll be back tomorrow. More of all this good stuff. Until then, may Jah bless you. In Jesus' name.